اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء وبقوتك التي قهرت بها كل شيء وخزأ لها كل شيء وذل لها كل شيء وبجبروتك التي غلبت بها كل شيء وبعزتك التي لا يقوم لها شيء وبعظمتك التي ملأت كل شيء وبسلطانك الذي على كل شيء وبوجهك الباقي بعد فناء كل شيء وبأسمائك التي ملأت أركان كل شيء وبعلمك الذي أحاط بكل شيء وبنور وجهك الذي أضاء له كل شيء. يا نور يا قدوس يا نور يا قدوس يا نور يا قدوس يا أول الأولين ويا آخر الآخرين. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحت كل إسام. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل النقام. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تغير النعم. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحبس الدعاء. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل البلاء. اللهم اغفر لكل ذنب أذنبته وكل خطيئة أخطأتها. اللهم إني أتقرب إليك بذكرك وأستشفئ بك إلى نفسك وأسألك بجودك أن تدنيني من قربك وأن توزعني شكرك وأن تلهمني ذكرك. اللهم إني أسألك سؤال خاضع متذلل خاشع أن تسامحني وترحمني وتجعلني بك اسمك راضيا قانعا وفي جميع الأحوال متواضعا. اللهم وأسألك سؤال من اشتدت فاقته وأنزل بك عند الشدائد حاجته وأزمى فيما عندك رغبته. اللهم أزمى سلطانك وعلى مكانك وخفي مكروك وظهر أمرك وغلب قهرك وجرت قدرتك ولا يمكن الفرار من حكومتك. اللهم لا أجد لذنوبي غافرا ولا لكبائه ساترا ولا لشيء من عملي القبيح بالحسن مبدلا غيرك. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك وبحمدك ظلمت نفسي ظلمت نفسي ظلمت نفسي وتجرأت بجهلي وسكنت إلى قديم ذكرك لي ومنك علي. اللهم مولاي كم من قبيح سترت وكم من فاضح من البلاء أكلت وكم من إصار وكيت وكم من مكروه دفعته، وكم من ثناء جميل لست أهلا له نشرته. اللهم أزم بلائي وأفرت بي سوء حالي، وكسرت بي أعمالي، وكدأت بي أغلالي، وحبسني عن نفعي بعد آمالي، وخدتني الدنيا بغرورها ونفسي بجنايتها. ومثالي يا سيدي فأسألك بعزتك أن لا يحجب عنك دعائي سوء أملي وفئالي، ولا تفضحني بخفي ما اطلعت عليه من سري، ولا تؤاجلني بالعقوبة على ما عملته في خلواتي من سوء فعلي وإساءتي ودوام تفريطي وجهالتي وكثرة شهواتي وغفلتي. وكن اللهم بعزتك في كل الأحوال رؤوفا علي في جميع الأمور أتوفا. إلهي وربي مني غيرك أسأله كشف ضري والنظر في أمري. إلهي ومولاي أجريت علي حكما اتبعت فيه هوى نفسي، ولم أحترس فيه من تزيين عدوي، فغرني بما أحوى وأسأله على ذلك الكذا، فتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعض حدودك، وخالفت بعض أوامرك، فلك الحمد علي في جميع ذلك، ولا حجة لي فيما جرى علي فيه قضاءك، وألزمني حكمك وبلاؤك. وقد أتيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي على نفسي، معتذرا نادما منكسرا مستكينا مستغفرا منيبا مكرا مزنا مؤترفا، لا أجد مفرا مما كان مني، ولا مفزعا أتوجه إليه في أمري غير قبولك عذري وإدخالك إياي في سعة من رحمتك. اللهم فاقبل عذري وارحم شدة ضري، وفكني من شد مساكي. يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني، يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني، يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني وركة جلدي ودكة عزمي. يا من بدأ خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتغذيتي، أبني لابتداء كرمك وصانف برك بي. يا إلهي وسيدي وربي، أتراك معذبي بنارك بعد توحيدك، وبعد ما انطوى عليه قلبي من معرفتك، ولحجابه لساني من ذكرك، واعتقده زميلي من حبك، وبعد صدق اعترافي ودعائي خاضعا لربوبيتك. هيهات أنت أكرم من أن تزيع من ربيت، أو تبعد من أدنيت، أو تشرد من آويت، أو تسلم إلى البلاء من كفيته ورحمته. وليت شعري يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي أتسلط النار على وجوه خرت لعظمتك ساجدا، وعلى ألسن نطقت بتوحيدك صادقا وبشكرك مادحا وعلى قلوب ترفعت بإلهيتك محققا وعلى أزمار حوت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعة وعلى جوارح سأت إلى أوطان تأبدك طائعة وأشارت باستغفارك مذئنا ما هكذا الظن بك ولا أخبرنا بفضلك عنك يا كريم يا رب يا كريم يا رب يا كريم يا رب وأنت تعلم ضعفي عن قليل من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهلها على أن ذلك بلاء ومكروه قليل مكسور يسير بقاء كثير مدته فكيف احتمالي لبلاء الآخرة وجليل وقوع المكاره فيها وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مقامه ولا يخفف عن أهله لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض يا سيدي فكيف بي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الذليل الحقير المسكين المستكين يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي لي الأمور إليك أشكو ولما منها أزج وأبكي لعليم العذاب وشدته أمن طول البلاء ومدته فلئن سيرتني للعقوبات مع أعدائك وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائك وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك فهبني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي وربي صبرت على عذابك فكيف أصبر على فراقك وحبني صبرت على حر نارك فكيف أصبر عن النظر إلى كرامتك أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجائي أفوت فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا لئن تركتني نعتك لأزجن إليك بين أهلها ضجيج العاملين ولأصرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين ولأبكين عليك بكاء الفاقدين ولا أنادينك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين يا غاية أعمال العارفين يا غياث المستغيثين يا غياث المستغيثين يا غياث المستغيثين يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين ويا إله العالمين أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم سجن فيها بمخالفته وذاك تعمى عذابها بمعصيته وهبس بين أطباقها بجرمه وجريرته وهو يزج إليك زجيج مؤمل رحمتك ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك يا مولاي فكيف يبقى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك؟ أم كيف تؤلمه النار وهو يأمل فضلك ورحمتك؟ أم كيف يهلكه نهيبها وأنت تسمع صوته وترى مكانه؟ أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفا؟ أم كيف يتكلكل بين أطباقها وأنت تعلم صدقا؟ أم كيف تزجره زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا رب؟ أم كيف يرجو فضلك في إتكه منها فتتركه فيها؟ هيهات ما ذلك الظن بك ولا المعروف من فضلك ولا مشبه لما أمنت به الموحدين من برك وإحسانك. فباليقين أكتأ لما حكمت به من تعذيب جاحديك وجزيت به من إخلاد معانديك لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما وما كان لأحد فيها مكرا ولا مقاما لكنك تقدست أسماؤك أقسمت أن تملأها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين وأن تخلد فيها المعاندين وأنت جل ثناؤك كنت مبتدئا وتطولت بالإنعام متكرما أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون إلهي وسيدي فأسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها وبالكزية التي حتمتها وحكمتها وغلبت من عليه أجريتها أن تهب لي في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمته وكل ذنب أذنبته وكل قبيح أسررته وكل جهل عملته كتمته أو أعلنته أخفيته أو أظهرته وكل سيئة أمرت بإثباتها الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جوارحي وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائهم والشاهد لما خفي عنهم وبرحمتك أخفيت وبفضلك سترت وأن توفر حظي من كل خير أنزلت أو إحسان فضلت أو بر نشرت أو رزق بسطت أو ذنب تغفر أو خطأ تستر يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا إلهي يا سيدي ومولاي ومالك ركي يا من بيده ناصيتي يا أليما بزري ومسكنتي يا خبيرا بفقري وفاقتي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب أسألك بحقك وقدسك وأعظم صفاتك وأسمائك أن تجعل أوقاتي في الليل والنهار ذكرك معمورا وبخدمتك موصولا وأعمالي عندك مقبولا حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدا وحالي في خدمتك سرمدا يا سيدي يا من عليه مأولي يا من إليه شكوت أحوالي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا ربي يا رب كون على خدمتك جوارحي واشد على العزيمة جوارحي وهب لي الجد في خشيتك والدوام في اتصال بخدمتك حتى أسرح إليك في ميادين السابقين وأسرع إليك في البارزين واشتاق إلى قربك في المشتاقين وأدنو منك دنو المخلصين وخافك مخافة الموقنين وأجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين اللهم من أرادني بالسوء فارده ومن كادني فكده واجعلني من أحسن عبيدك نصيبا عندك وأقربهم منزلة منك وخسهم زلفة لديك فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك وجودني بجودك وعطف علي بمجدك واحفظني برحمتك واجعل لساني بذكرك لهجا وقلبي بحبك متيما ومن علي بحسن إجابتك وأكلني أسرتي واغفر زلتي فإنك كزيت على عبادك بعبادتك وأمرته بدعائك وزمنت لهم الإجابة فإليك يا ربي نسبت وجهي وإليك يا ربي مددت يدي فبعزتك استجب لي دعائي وبلغني مناي ولا تعت من فضلك رجائي واكفني شر الجنة والإنس من أعدائي يا سريع الرضا يا سريع الرضا يا سريع الرضا اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء فإنك فعال لما تشاء يا من اسمه دواء وذكره شفاء وطاعته غنى ارحم من رأس مالها الرجاء وصلاحه البكاء يا سابغ النعم يا دافع النكام يا نور المستوحشين في الظلام يا عالما لا يعلم صل على محمد وآل محمد وافعل بما أنت أهله وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa Jazakallah, Brother Daniel. May Allah accept your recitation. Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina wa Nabiyyina Abil Qasim al-Mustafa Muhammadin wa alihi al-Tahirin. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. الخطبة السادسة والعشرون خطبة number 26. فنظرت فإذا ليس لي معين إلا أهل بيتي فظننت بهم عن الموت وأغضيت على القضاء وشربت على الشجع وصبرت على أخذ الكظم وعلى أمر من طعم العلقم. Continuing with khutbah number 26 of Nahjul Balagha. This khutbah, as I said before, is actually three parts of maybe the same khutbah. Sayyid al-Radi has chosen parts from this khutbah and hasn't brought the whole thing. As we've said again and again, the reason is that the criteria for selecting khutbahs in Nahjul Balagha, the criteria for Shaykh Sayyid al-Radi is the eloquence. And so while he does bring khutbahs, he will sometimes bring them in little pieces and take out lots of parts. So here, what is for sure is that there are some gaps that you can easily tell in different parts of this khutbah, which is khutbah number 26. The first part of the khutbah is the Imam is speaking about how the people were, how the Arab were before Islam and before the Holy Prophet, and what the Prophet did for them and brought for them that fixed their dunya and akhirah. If you remember, he even was speaking about how the Imam was speaking about how they were drinking bad water even before Islam and before the Holy Prophet, how they were living amongst the snakes and so on. But Islam, and that's even with the dunya. So the Prophet comes, their dunya gets better, their akhirah of course gets better. He's talking about that in the first part of the khutbah. Then the part that we want to cover today has nothing to do with that first part of the khutbah. All of a sudden it jumps to the time after the Holy Prophet has passed away. And we all know about Saqifa and some things regarding Saqifa. And then all of a sudden it jumps again to the third part of the khutbah. There's a jump in time again where the Imam speaks about after Uthman has been killed and after Imam Ali has asked Muawiyah for bay'ah, but Muawiyah has turned him down and has gotten Amr bin al-As to come on his side. So these are three parts of this khutbah, and it's very obvious that there are jumps that are taken. But let's go to the second part now that we want to talk about. And that is the part where he says, فَنَظَرْتُ فَإِذَا لَيْسَ لِي مُعِينٌ إِلَّا أَهْلُ بَيْتِي. There's some very important points here regarding after the Holy Prophet's demise. We all know about Saqifa, we all know about what happened more or less in Saqifa and what came out of Saqifa. What came out of it was the Khilafah of the first Khalifa Abu Bakr, and of course the Shi'i school of thought has issues with that. I don't want to get into that story right now, but after Bay'ah is taken from the people for Abu Bakr, the question is, Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, what was he up to? How did he see things? And was it just that he had to just be patient? Or no, he had other things in mind, but then when he noticed that those other things he has in mind are not practical or might do more harm than good, then he went to plan B which was patience. So here, it seems like there was that patience was the plan B in all of this. Now, some will say that yes, the Holy Prophet had told him to be patient. Yeah, this doesn't go against what the Prophet ﷺ had told Imam Ali to be patient, because the Prophet probably knew that he will have to resort to plan B eventually, and he will have to have patience for the greater good. So these are not contradicting each other. the fact that plan A might have been something else for Imam Ali, but since plan A wasn't going to go through, he has to now resort to plan B. All right, so it says فَنَظَرْتُ. So the Imam, after he jumps from the time of the Prophet and what the Prophet did for the people through bringing them Islam, he jumps to this point now where he says, so I looked and I pondered, I reflected, I thought to myself, نَظَرْتُ فَإِذَا لَيْسَ لِي مُعِينٌ إِلَّا أَهْلُ بَيْتِ. I found that I have no one to aid me except my Ahlul Bayt, my family. Yeah. So in other words, he has no one to help him. Okay. So wait right here. Let's just stop right here and think a little bit. Okay. So if your plan A was to be patient all along, then what does this line here even mean? It shows that his plan A wasn't to give in to the status quo and to just be okay with everything that's happening. Apparently, he had a plan, but then he looks around and he sees that there's no one there to help him in this plan of his. Right? So as a result of that, he resorts to plan B, okay? Which is to get along with, whatever is going on and not cause too many problems for the Muslim Ummah. So this is also nice, the way the Imam words it here. He says, I looked around, I didn't see anyone except my Ahlul Bayt. This is nice. فَظَنِنْتُ بِهِمْ عَنِ الْمَوْتِ. فَظَنِنْتُ بِهِمْ عَنِ الْمَوْتِ. We have this same root in the Quran as well when the Quran says, وَمَا هُوَ عَلَى الْغَيْبِ بِضَنِينَ. ضَنِين, kind of, it might be a word that kind of bears a little bit of negativity and negative connotations, okay? In the Quran, it says, look, the Holy Prophet, when it comes to the ghaib and the unseen and that which he has of revelation, he is not dhaneen. Dhaneen means selfish, to keep something for yourself only. He shares it all with you because revelation is to be shared with everybody, right? Okay, so there, that word is used, and the Quran is saying he is not such. It kind of, if I'm not mistaken, it kind of has this negative connotation to it in the sense of, someone who is really trying to cling on to something and hold on to it. Okay. But it's interesting that the Imam uses this word here for himself to illustrate how important the Ahlul Bayt are and to preserve them in their lives. Okay. He says, فَظَنِنْتُ بِهِمْ. I looked around. I saw that all I have is the Ahlul Bayt. My Ahlul Bayt to aid me and help me. فَظَنِنْتُ بِهِمْ. So I was very selfish about them. Now here, it's selfish, but in a good way, meaning the most important thing to me was to protect them and preserve them. I don't want to lose the Ahlul Bayt over this. What is this talking about? فَنَدِنْتُ بِهِمْ عَنِ الْمَوْتِ, from death. Wow. So the Imam, his plan A apparently had something to do with putting your life on the line. And this is something that lots of times is skipped over and might be neglected because people have heard that the Holy Prophet told Ali ibn Abi Talib, be patient, as if plan A was to be patient. No, be patient meaning in the end you're going to have to be patient. You won't be able to carry out any other plans and you will have to be patient for the good of the ummah. So be patient, yeah? That is true, but that was plan B. Plan A had something to do with putting your life on the line, yes? But the price that would have to be paid is that Ali ibn Abi Talib probably would have become shaheed if he had fought back after Saqifa. Not only that, he feels that Imam Hassan, Imam Hussein are going to try to help him maybe. Although they were, very young, they might even lose their lives in all of this as well. And Imam Ali alayhi salam doesn't have permission to jeopardize the lives of the Ahlul Bayt. These Ahlul Bayt have to live as long as possible so that their descendants, their progeny of Ahlul Bayt, the Imams of Ahlul Bayt can continue to come one after another. Imam Ali alayhi salam is not going to allow this blessed tree, this blessed family tree to be jeopardized. Yeah, this is very important. And this is something in one of his khutbahs, again, he brings it up And we might have discussed this previously as well in the whole story of the Battle of Siffin, when those who are pushing for the arbitration and the hakamiyya, the tahkim, when they surround him and they say, we will take your life, we will kill you, O Ali. These are people who are on the same side of Ali ibn Abi Talib, fighting against Muawiyah. But when Muawiyah, through the cunningness of Amr bin al-As, that we might talk about later today, through his cunningness, through his deception, they took the Qur'ans and showed it to the people of Kufa, to the army of Ali ibn Abi Talib, saying, that we are also followers of this Qur'an, don't kill us. Yeah, over there, the people of the army, some of the army of Ali ibn Abi Talib falls for this trick. They surround Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, and they want to kill Ali now because he's fighting Muslims. They're like, we thought you said these guys don't care about Islam, don't care about the Quran, but they are caring about the Quran. How dare you? Here, Muawiyah was about to get killed by Malik bin Ashtar. Yeah? They say, tell Malik to come back and don't fight Muawiyah anymore. But Malik is this close to finishing the job. Some people here might think to themselves, okay, why didn't Ali fight against the people that had surrounded him, the thousands, of course, that had surrounded him, even if he had lost his life, but not given in to their demand of Ali stopping the battle? Yes, and Malik finishing off Muawiyah and the rest that were around him. Why didn't he? Well, Ali ibn Abi Talib discloses this in one of his sayings. He says, I was afraid that if I get killed, Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein are also going to get killed in this scuffle. And I can't let that happen because they are the Imams of Ahlul Bayt that are to continue this family tree, this lineage. So it goes back to preserving and protecting the lives of the Ahlul Bayt again. Whether it's in Siffin, whether it's after Saqifa. Like, these are the things that usually are not discussed. People will say, oh, how could Ali ibn Abi Talib, the champion and warrior of Khaybar, not fight back after they came to him to get bay'ah from him for the first Khalifa? Well, one of the reasons is this, that our scholars explain, is that if he had fought back, this champion and warrior, yes, he himself says, فَظَنِنْتُ بِهِمْ عَنِ الْمَوْتِ, that I figured that my most important thing that I have to be obsessed about even is to preserve the lives of the Ahlul Bayt. فَظَنِنْتُ بِهِمْ عَنِ الْمَوْتِ. So as a result of all of this, what do? We resort to and fall back on plan B. Plan B, which is what? أغضيت على القضاء شربت على الشجع صبرت على أخذ الكظم وعلى أمر من طعم العلقم. So these four things he says here. Number one, أغضيت على القضاء. When you blink, when you shut your eyes, that's إغضاء, they say. And so he says, I had no choice but to close my eyelids. Maybe he means like turn a blind eye to all the fitna that was happening, for the greater good, of course, while there was something stuck in my eye. Okay? So we've all been in that situation where we try to close our eyes, a dust particle is stuck in our eye. It's not the most pleasant of things. As a matter of fact, it's very hard to blink when you have something stuck in your eye, brothers and sisters. He says, so that's what I did though. I closed my eyes while there was as if dust. Now, qada doesn't mean dust. I'm just saying dust here. Right? But it means something that, those things that get stuck in the eye that can really bother the eye. So one, I closed my eyes on something like that. It's not easy. Number two, of course, he's speaking very metaphorically here to illustrate for us how hard it was for him to do this. And I'll talk about why it must have been hard for him. Just a few things that we'll talk about. Sharibtu ala shaja. Yes, let's say I swallowed the the bone or whatever it was that was stuck in my throat. I swallowed it. Yeah. Once again, when something's stuck in your throat and you're suffocating on it, it's hard to swallow it. I swallowed it, he says. صبرت على أخذ الكظم. I took the path of bottling up the anger, being patient, and it was as if I was consuming أمر من طعم العلقم. Alqam, they say, is a tree that maybe has the most bitter fruit that you can have. He says, for me, it was like that. That's what I was swallowing. The most bitter of tastes, the most bitter of trees, I was tasting in all of this. Now the question is, why is it so bitter for him? Well, I think it's not that hard to figure out what was so hard about all of this. Number one, he's ma'soom, and he knows that the people that are going to be in charge now are not ma'soom, and a lot of mistakes are going to be made. And yes, mistakes were made throughout those 25 years of Imam Ali not being Khalifa. Number one. Number two, he could see that the doors to bid'ah are going to open up. This was a concern of his. Imam Ali, one of his concerns was the fact that bid'ah was going to creep into the tradition of Islam and the faith of Islam. Right? When you can bring in others as Khalifa, while you have nas, you have proof and evidence by the Holy Prophet that he had someone in mind to succeed him. When something like that can be put aside, that's that great and that important and significant, then even smaller things, yes, can make their way in. Bid'ahs, different forms of innovation, can make their way into Islam as well. Number two. Number three, which I think might be the worst of them all, is that Imam Ali is not your normal person here. He can see the future. Like, it doesn't even have to do with ilm al-ghayb and knowledge of the unseen. He can tell that this path that the Muslim Ummah is embarked on and now is traversing is a path that will lead to destruction. Yeah? And we believe that the reason why, one of the main reasons why Ashura took place 50 years after the Holy Prophet, is because of the direction the Muslim Ummah took from the beginning. True, Abu Bakr was not from Banu Umayyah. Umar ibn al-Khattab was not of Banu Umayyah. But the grounds were set for Banu Umayyah eventually to take power. Mistakes were made. The likes of Muawiyah were made governors of Sham during Umar ibn al-Khattab's time. And eventually, Muawiyah becomes Khalifatul Muslimin during the time of Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam. And of course, in his opinion, even during the time of Ali ibn Abi Talib, after the arbitration and Hakamiyya took place, right? So these are the things that Imam Ali is seeing. Of course, the life of his love, Fatima al-Zahra, was lost in this way, according to the Shi'i school of thought as well. And so this is what makes it bitter for him. And so it's hard for him to not speak up. This champion of Khaybar, as they say, this champion of Khaybar has to sheath his sword and not fight back. That's hard for him. Because Ali ibn Abi Talib is a person who he knows that even if it takes the sword to fight back, he's not a person to shy away from that and to run away from that. So when a champion and a warrior like this sees that they have to sit down and keep quiet, of course, I say it very loosely. Keep quiet meaning not object in the long run, not to object to this idea of Khilafah being taken away from him. Throughout these 25 years, we don't find him every day coming out and telling the people, I was usurped of my right. He did make it clear again and again, but all in all, he didn't make the hugest deal out of it either, because, for example, after Uthman became Khalifa, he said, look, I'm supposed to be Khalifa, but it's fine. As long as the people, their affairs are taken care of, I don't want to make too much noise, whatever. If it's only my right that's being trampled, I'm fine with it. He says this in Nahjul Balagha. Right? So for him, he wasn't making a huge deal out of it. It's hard though. It's hard. It's bitter. And that's why we have, going back to this plan A versus plan B, where he says, I looked around and I only had my Ahlul Bayt to help me. And that was his plan A, really, to fight, it seems. We have other reports that tell us, for example, he says, لَوْ وَجَدْتُ أَرْبَعِينَ ذَوِي عَزْبٍ لَقَاتَلْتُ. If I had found 40 people who were people of resolve, yes, they had azm, then I would have fought. I would have fought. لَقَاتَلْتُ. I would have fought. But it turns out he didn't. And he says, all I had was the few of my Ahlul Bayt. Yeah. And so history took that course that we as Shia believe that it shouldn't have taken. So that's part number 2 of the khutbah. Let's move on to part number 3 of the khutbah now. Once again, we have a jump in time in the timeline of Islamic history where Imam Ali goes from post Saqifa all the way to post Jamal and Battle of Jamal. So fast forward to 25 years later, okay? Something like that, around 25 years later. What is he talking about? He is talking about where he says, وَلَمْ يُبَايِعْ حَتَّى شَرَطَ أَن يُؤْتِيَهُ عَلَى الْبَيْعَةِ ثَمَنًا. It says, what this means is, the translation is, and he didn't give bay'ah. He, who is he? There's a pronoun here, we don't know who it goes back to. We don't know, meaning the khutbah, because it has parts taken out, we don't know exactly who in the text it's talking about, but of course, the researchers and all that, they've done the work and they know from the context as well who it's talking about. And we'll talk about that in a second. It says he didn't give bay'ah until he put a condition that he is given something in return for his bay'ah. So what's going on here? Let's contextualize things a little bit. After the Battle of Jamal, it says that Ali ibn Abi Talib, he stayed in Kufa. Before that, before the Battle of Jamal, of course, he was in Medina. And so after the Battle of Jamal took place, when Imam Ali wanted to fight in the Battle of Jamal, he came to Kufa, and the Kufans were the ones who helped him the most. And that was his army from the Kufans. And that's why they will say that the army of Kufa, it was the army of Kufa versus the army of Basra in the Battle of Jamal. In reality, that's what it kind of boiled down to. And so it says that after the Battle of Jamal, Imam Ali, he comes into Kufa and makes it his kind of the capital, kind of where he is staying, right? And from there, he sends a representative to Muawiyah. Okay? He sends a representative to Muawiyah to get bay'ah from Muawiyah. Now, what does Muawiyah say? Muawiyah, it says here that he didn't want to give bay'ah, of course, as we all know. And he consults his brother Utbah bin Abi Sufyan. What should we do? What should we do? He says, let's get Amr bin al-As to come and discuss and get him on our side. All right, what's going on here? Let's talk about Amr bin al-As a little bit. Who is Amr bin al-As? Amr bin al-As is a person that was one of the greatest enemies, of course, of Islam and the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He embraced Islam towards the end, not during the conquest of Mecca, but maybe a couple of years, 2-3 years maybe, if I'm not mistaken, I don't remember exactly, before the conquest of Mecca. So now, the Shia school of thought is very critical of Muawiyah embracing Islam, either during the conquest of Mecca or like a little bit before it. But Amr bin al-As, 3-4 years before the conquest of Mecca, voluntarily embraced Islam. This is very interesting. And he did it with Khalid bin Walid. Here, usually historians, anyone who has a little bit of is familiar with historical analysis will easily say that, of course, knowing Amr bin al-As and how smart and cunning he was, they'll say that it's very clear to us that he could tell that Islam is going to prevail, right? Way before, 2, 3, 4 years before the conquest of Mecca took place. Because once the conquest of Mecca took place, okay, everyone knew that Islam has prevailed then. That is when Islam actually like prevailed physically. They say that Amr bin al-As, he could tell, okay, it's the way things are going, Islam is going to prevail. And so he's the one who goes to the Holy Prophet ﷺ with Khalid bin Walid, and they embrace Islam with the Holy Prophet. So that's one point I wanted to make. Another point that I want to make is this, that, okay, so before this, he was a big enemy, staunch enemy of Islam, and he was in Mecca. Who is his father? Al-As bin Wa'il, that some reports will tell us is the one that Surah Al-Kawthar was revealed in response to. What's the story? Yeah, they say that his father, this As bin Wa'il, who died a mushrik, of course, he never was Muslim, and he died a mushrik and an enemy of the Holy Prophet. It says that one time he was speaking to the Holy Prophet ﷺ, and then after he speaks with the Prophet, he comes and some of these big shots of Quraysh are sitting, and they're like, "Oh, who are you talking to?" He's like, they ask him, "Man alladhi kunt tatahaddath ma'ahu?" Who's the one you were talking to? قال ذلك الأبتر. Says that abtar. Abtar, of course, means a person who is disconnected, or is something that is disconnected or cut short, referring to the Holy Prophet after he had lost his son Ibrahim as an infant. This son of his had died, and so the mushrikeen of Quraysh were mocking the Prophet, that the Prophet has nobody to succeed him after him. Yeah? So what does he say? He says, دَعُوهُ فَإِنَّهُ رَجُلٌ أَبْتَرٌ. Leave this guy, who cares about him? This the Holy Prophet. Leave him. He is a person that's abtar. He's cut short. His lineage won't continue. فَإِذَا هَلَكَ إِنْقَطَعَ ذِكْرُهُ. When he dies, don't worry. His remembrance will die with him. No one will remember him anymore because there's no one to succeed him. And so they say, one of the opinions here is that Surah Al-Kawthar was revealed about this As bin Wa'il, the father of Amr bin al-As. Okay. So this is a little short introduction to him, but this guy, Amr bin al-As, we have to understand, of course, is very revered in the Sunni school of thought. He is seen as a Sahabi, but for us as Shia, of course, we just because someone's a Sahabi isn't going to be enough, and we look at their actions and their report card throughout history to have a judgment about them. Now, for him, of course, he is a very, very controversial figure in the Shi'i school of thought. Very controversial. They say he had to do with the shirt of Uthman being sent to Muawiyah, and how that Muawiyah capitalized on the bloody shirt of Uthman. He capitalized on it in Sham, hanging it up for like a year, showing the people like this is Uthman and they killed him, and Ali is the one at fault, and we have to take revenge and all of that of the killers, and Ali has to turn in the killers of Uthman, and so on. So they say he had to do with that. When the Battle of Siffin takes place, he's the one who comes up with the idea of raising the Qur'ans up high so that the army of Imam Ali can see the Qur'ans, and that fitna that took place. He is the one who represented Muawiyah in the arbitration after Siffin, in the tahkim. He is the one who represented Muawiyah, and eventually, as history tells us, took Khilafah from Ali alayhi salam and gave it to Muawiyah. Right? Now there's two main opinions here. Some say he took all of Khilafah and gave it to Imam Ali. That's the maximalist approach and opinion. There's also a minimalist approach or opinion that says, no, he didn't take all of Khilafah, but the least is that what he did is he was able to secure the governance of Sham for Muawiyah exclusively. And Ali alayhi salam is going to be Khalifa for the rest of the Muslim lands. He was the one who did this. He is a huge deal in the Shi'i school of thought because of the things that he did. Now, once again, I want to, and this is just an intro of who Amr bin al-As is, and we have major issues with him as Shia. But now let's talk about these lines here that are mentioned in the khutbah. وَلَمْ يُبَايِعْ حَتَّى شَرَطَ أَن يُؤْتِيَهُ عَلَى الْبَيْعَةِ ثَمَنًا. All right, so this Amr al-As, who's on Muawiyah's side, how did he end up on Muawiyah's side? How did he end up giving bay'ah to Muawiyah? The answer the Imam is saying here. He says he didn't give bay'ah until he was able to get a guarantee from Muawiyah that he's going to get something in return. What's going on here? What's going on is that when Muawiyah sent for Amr to try to get him to come on his side, Amr said, listen, I have a condition, and that is that you have to give me Egypt. Now here, let me read here for you what is said between the two. It says, Ya Aba Abdullah, so his kunya was Abu Abdullah apparently. Muawiyah tells him in a gathering, he says, look, I'm asking you to come on my side. Help me out in fighting this person, Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. أدعوك إلى الجهاد إلى جهاد هذا الرجل. This person, الذي عصى Allah, who has gone against Allah. Astaghfirullah. That he's saying these things about Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. الذي عصى Allah, he disobeyed Allah. شق عصى المسلمين. Yeah, he divided the Muslims. قتل الخليفة, killed the Khalifa Uthman. أظهر الفتنة, brought about fitna and division. وفرق الجماعة, broke up the one group that we had into different groups. قطع الرحم, he severed his blood ties, because at the end of the day we were all cousins. Yes, us, we're all from the Quraysh, we're all cousins, but then with what he did, he severed these blood relationships and blood ties that we had with each other. Now what does Amr say in response to him? Amr, it says here, and this is all in Ibn Abil Hadid's book. He says, Wallahi ma anta. He says, look, you want to go against Ali ibn Abi Talib. You two aren't the same. You two are not equals. Why? Laysa laka hijratahu. He migrated with the Prophet. You didn't migrate. You stayed in Mecca. You were against the Prophet till the very end. Wala sabiqatahu. You don't have the history that he has, the reputation that he has, the report card that he has. Wala suhbatahu. If you're a Sahabi because of the little bit of time that you were forced to become Muslim, and you were with the Prophet after that, well, of course, there are different opinions in regards to whether Muawiyah actually went to help the Prophet in Medina or not. But anyway, if you're a Sahabi, you're like third tier Sahabi. Imam Ali alayhi salam is first tier Sahabi. Wala jihaduhu, he fought for Islam like no other. You haven't done anything really. Wala fiqhuhu wala ilmuhu, his deep understanding of the religion, his knowledge, it just, you're no match for him. So how do you think you're going to pull this off? He says, وَوَاللَّهِ إِنَّ لَهُ مَعَ ذَلِكَ لَحَظًّا فِي الْحَرْبِ لَيْسَ لَأَحَدٍ غَيْرَهُ. And then now you want to fight him? You got to understand, this guy in battle, he's unmatched. No one can fight this person when it comes to the battlefield. So what do you think, what do you expect to accomplish, man? So these are the things that have been mentioned that he said in response to Muawiyah. But then he says this. He says, if I give you my bay'ah though, what do you have in store for me? What will you give me as a prize? Now it's interesting here because when you want to sell something, brothers and sisters, you have to market it, right? Before you actually sell it for money, you have to sell it to that person, meaning you have to have them sold on that thing that you're selling them. You have to give them a reason to believe they need what you're selling them, right? And so this is exactly what Amr has done based on this, in my opinion, right here, this report that I just shared with you. First, he lets Muawiyah know, that what Muawiyah is trying to quote unquote purchase here is something that is worth a lot of money, let's say. It's something expensive, right? You really need this Muawiyah because you are no match for Ali alayhi salam, right? Okay. Having said that, and having explained how expensive the goods are, then he starts looking at the price tag and speaking of and negotiating a price. So Amr says, so now tell me, how much? Yeah? What are you going to give me in return for my bay'ah? That if I give you my bay'ah, I'm going to solve these problems for you. Right? So what does Muawiyah say? He says, look, whatever you want, you put the price. He gives them a blank check, right? So Amr bin al-As, he says, well, after your victory, and when it's all over, I want to be governor of Egypt. Now, mind you, brothers and sisters, right now, when this conversation is going on between Muawiyah and Amr, Misr, Egypt, is under the rule and jurisdiction of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. And he has put someone there um, as a governor. And so that's his jurisdiction. But Amr can predict, he's predicting that they will be victorious. That he will find a way to defeat Imam Ali alayhi salam. But for that, he has a big, heavy price tag, and that is that he is going to be governor of Egypt. Right? So that is what he's asking for. Now they negotiate. There's some things. Muawiyah talks about certain things. He says, I don't want people to, say that, Amr is a dunyawi person. All he's after is the dunya and all that kind of stuff. To which Amr responds, don't worry about that stuff. All right, don't worry about it. This is what I'm asking for. And so, of course, Muawiyah agrees. And so this is the report of Ibn Abil Hadid in regards to this. All right, so now going back to what Imam Ali alayhi salam is saying here. He says, فَلَا ظَفِرَتْ يَدُ الْمُبَايَعْ وَخَزِيَتْ أَمَانَةُ الْمُبْتَاعِ. He says that he says here, Imam Ali, he says something that sounds like he is cursing this whole transaction that takes place. He says, may the hand of the one who is giving bay'ah never be victorious and get what it wants, and may the amana that is what is being given in return, that trust which is being given in return for this bay'ah, also never make it, right? So what's going on here? What does he mean by this? First, he's actually, he's cursing both, and is asking Allah to strip away his blessing from both of the both of the ones who are doing this transaction with each other. But it's interesting. He says, وَخَزِيَتْ أَمَانَةُ الْمُبْتَاعِ. The one who is giving this in return, giving Egypt in return for the bay'ah of Amr, Imam Ali uses the term amana. In other words, what he's saying is that Muawiyah is giving a trust, something that is a trust. He is using that to purchase the bay'ah of Amr. What is going on here? Well, I think it's very obvious. The Muslim lands are not something that anyone is going to own so they can give it away, buy it or sell it, things like that. Misr, Egypt is part of the Muslim lands. And so these lands are a trust by Allah in the hands of the governors and the Khalifa. And they have to, along with the wealth that's within them, along with all the other resources that are within them, they are to be maintained and managed in favor of and to the benefit of the Muslims. This is an amanah for whoever is ruling. This is a trust. And so Ali ibn Abi Talib, he says, he is spending the trust of Allah in this way. So may it never make it to its destination. Yes. Some have said this is a dua against those two. Some have said no, Imam Ali is just predicting the future, that this won't happen and so on. And they have explained, those who have this second opinion have explained how, even though it did happen, but it wasn't very long-lived either. So now I have to explain this a little bit about Amr bin al-As and Egypt itself. Why is this guy so in love with Egypt? Let's go back in history a little bit, have a little flashback. And once again, let's give a little bit of context here. Amr, during the time of the second Khalifa, Amr went on a conquest and conquered the lands of Egypt. And Umar ibn al-Khattab, the second Khalifa, put him there and kept him there as the governor of Egypt. Historians and or scholars, they tell us that he had seen and experienced life in Egypt. Back then, that Egypt was a very strategic land, bearing a lot of wealth. And so he had seen all of this. He knows what it's all about. And so he's interested. So what happens is, during the time of the second Khalifa, till the end of his life, of the second Khalifa's life, he is governor of Egypt. After Uthman comes to power, also Amr bin al-As is still governor, but it reaches a point where Uthman removes him. And as you all probably know, Uthman had this issue of removing people from their positions and plugging in and putting in, his own relatives of Banu Umayyah, right? So Amr bin al-As is not Banu Umayyah, of course. He removes him and puts someone else of his relatives in his place. What does Amr bin al-As do? Amr bin al-As, they say he goes to Philistine. He had some land there that he goes and lives there. And from there, he comes back to Medina, and then after that goes to Philistine. Something like that. Right now my memory is not helping me too much. But anyway, he ends up in Philistine, and he is there. And from there, they say that he kind of was involved in mobilizing people against Uthman when Uthman was attacked. Once again, of course, this is not something that mainstream Sunni school of thought will accept, but some historians have pointed these things out, and this is a point of contention. But we as Shia do not believe it to be far-fetched. Let's say it like that. That he was, if some parts of history do tell us that, and there are some reports that he had some involvement, it's no surprise for us. He'll have a grudge against Uthman because Uthman removed him. And of course, he does things in a very smart way, as we've seen throughout history. And so here also, he will somehow be involved. There's no problem with that. It kind of adds up, in our eyes at least. Okay, so now, after Uthman is killed, this is where Muawiyah, and after the battle of Jamal, Muawiyah reaches out to him and says, can you come and give me bay'ah, come on my side? He says, I'll give you bay'ah if you put me back in Egypt. But the problem is, brothers and sisters, Egypt did not belong to Muawiyah then. And that's why in their conversation, he says, if we're victorious, I want you to give me Egypt. Right? So this is part of Imam Ali's jurisdiction right now. So what happened is this, brothers and sisters, according to what they tell us in history, is that after the battle of Siffin, Imam Ali, he, of course, is in charge of Egypt. What happens is, after the Kufans, and we talked about this in previous sessions, after the Kufans desert Ali ibn Abi Talib after the battle of Nahrawan, and they're like, they refuse to go and to fight against Muawiyah for a second time. So Siffin took place, Nahrawan took place. After Nahrawan, Ali ibn Abi Talib wanted to mobilize his troops to go back and fight Muawiyah, but then the Kufans are like, look, we're done, we're tired. They all really deserted Imam Ali. And so here Muawiyah senses the vulnerability of Imam Ali here, and so he starts sending little armies to go and strike and come back to Sham. Strike, bring instability, take people's lives, cause chaos and anarchy as much as they can throughout the Muslim lands. One of the first places that falls to Muawiyah and his people is Misr, Egypt. Egypt wasn't too far away from Sham. And so he sends Amr bin al-As to take over the lands of Egypt. You see how things are coming together, brothers and sisters? He goes, Qais bin Sa'd bin Ubadah has gone to Medina. Imam Ali has put someone else by the name of Muhammad bin Abi Bakr in his place. Muhammad, this great companion of Ali ibn Abi Talib, like a son to Imam Ali, he's there, and the army comes. Amr bin al-As sends an army. The army comes to fight. Muhammad sends letters to Imam Ali. What do I do? Imam Ali says, stay and resist and fight back. Send an army out to intercept them, and you stay in Egypt with your own army. So 2,000 troops are sent to intercept the army of Amr, and they fight, and the army is destroyed. The army of Muhammad bin Abi Bakr is destroyed, and they become shaheed. And this army of Amr bin al-As makes its way to Egypt. And unfortunately, the army that was within Egypt that was supposed to help Muhammad bin Abi Bakr, they desert him as well, and he goes into hiding. And they finally get their hands on Muhammad. Now, in the meantime, Imam Ali had sent Malik al-Ashtar to go and replace Muhammad bin Abi Bakr, but Muawiyah had him poisoned along the way, at least according to the history that we believe in. Okay, so these companions of Imam Ali are wiped out one after another. So Muhammad has to stay in Egypt. Okay, and these armies and these clashes take place. Eventually, he's deserted as well. They get their hands on Muhammad bin Abi Bakr, and according to the history that I've looked at, they behead him, and they put his body into the corpse of a dead animal, and they light the whole thing on fire. Yes, they light the whole thing on fire, and his body burns to ashes. And when Aisha, because Muhammad bin Abi Bakr was Aisha's brother, when Aisha hears about this in Medina, she says that I will never eat meat again. She's upset. This was her brother at the end of the day. Although they were against each other in the battle of Jamal, Muhammad was on the side of Ali alayhi salam, and Aisha was on the other side. But she was still very disturbed by this and what happened, and she says, I will never eat meat again because of this. Anyway, so the point I'm trying to make is this. Eventually Amr comes, takes over Egypt, and becomes ruler of Egypt again for a few years. Okay, so that is this part of the khutbah. And I know I've gone a little longer than the time I'm about to end. Inshallah, this khutbah is about to end. So Imam Ali, he says this. He discloses and exposes that yes, the bay'ah happened, but the bay'ah happened with a big fat price tag. It came at a price, and that is Egypt for Amr bin al-As. So then the Imam continues, he says, فَخُذُوا لِلْحَرْبِ أُهْبَتَهَا وَأَعِدُّ لَهَا عُدَّتَهَا. He says, okay, so when this is the case, we have to get ready for battle. So I want everyone to have their readiness. I want everyone to be prepared properly for this battle of Siffin that's about to take place. Yeah? The battle of Siffin wants to take place. فَقَدْ شَبَّ لَظَاهَا وَعَلَى سَنَاهَا. Its flames have grown high and its brightness has increased. Now this is the translation that you find, the English translations that we have. But the words that he has used are very eloquent here. Shabba comes from shabab. When something is young, yeah, it is shab. And so he says the flame of it is really at its peak of freshness. Like this is it right here. Wa'ala sanaha. Yes, and it's the flames have gone very high. وَاسْتَشْعِرُوا الصَّابْرَ فَإِنَّهُ أَدْعَى إِلَى النَّصْرِ. All right, so if this is the case, clothe yourselves with patience. Right? We have to be patient. Fighting is not an easy thing. But those who are patient, they are the closest to nasr. They are the closest to victory. And this doesn't necessarily mean that patience is the key to victory only when it comes to physical battles. Anything that one wants to accomplish, even when it comes to struggles with the self and the struggles with the nafs, at the end of the day, the only thing that is going to matter and is going to help is patience. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. And we do have one question here. How do these historical events impact our lives and lessons to be learned? Well, I do have to say something about that. It's not that every single thing that has happened in history that we cover, we have to try to find something practical that applies to us right now today through that story that takes place. Sometimes what we get out of history is more of an understanding of the bigger picture itself and what the picture looks like. Once a person gets these different pieces of the puzzle and pieces this puzzle together, having an idea of the whole thing sometimes will have an effect on our lives. Just having information sometimes helps of what has happened in the past. So it's not like, okay, every single line of Nahjul Balagha, now we have to take a lesson. Yeah. Although I personally think that there are lessons in this, especially the last line that the Imam said. He went through everything, prepared everyone for that last line. From the beginning of the khutbah, he says, listen, people, remember the Prophet's time. Remember after Saqifa. Remember now, I'm telling you about what is going on, what this bay'ah is all about, and that it all comes, he did it, for something in return, which was Egypt. All of this, the Imam gets these people ready to tell them, okay, so now that you know that your responsibility is to now aid me in fighting against the enemy, let me remind you that the only thing that will help you in winning against such a thing, yes, now that you know it's your responsibility, is to have patience. Yeah. Sometimes that will be the lesson that we get out of a whole story, is that the Imam goes through all these details to get us ready, to give us this one last point, to show us, because this is something we've heard a million times. Patience is patience, patience, patience. But when he tells us all of these details and then wants to conclude one line from it all, it sits within our hearts in much stronger and is more long-lasting, and reminds us of the struggles we have in our lives, and how that the only way to, inshallah, be victorious in those struggles is through our patience. I thank all of you for tuning in. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.